Mixing with Mike, episode number 59. Let the mixing begin. In this week's episode, we're going to take a look at mixing with the H-comp. And this is one that a lot of people have because it comes with some of the earlier bundles from the Waves collection. And it is meant to emulate much of the behaviors and characteristics of vintage plugins. So most of these mixing technique of the week in terms of working with particular plugins has been mostly about working with vintage components. And I think there's something important about that. I mean, if you were really going to take on some exercises in terms of working with particular plugins, a great exercise is just to take a mix and just put them on that whole mix, right, on every channel and figure out how you can make it sound good with any given channel. What this does is it informs you of the way that it works, what it works well on, what it does not work well on, different ways to use it. As you start to work on more things, then you may uncover by accident some things. Go through the presets and find out if any of those sort of show you something that you maybe didn't see before. Notice what the settings are. Take a look at it. And this is a way of educating yourself about how a particular plugin works. You know, you really need to master your plugins. So it's better, to sort of band limit yourself, if you will, to particular plugin sets so that as you're, working with different sounds, you can kind of get an idea, different audio files, tracks, instruments, etc. You can get a good idea of what's doing what, how it's working. And this, in the long run really informs you about how to mix, because what'll happen is you'll be in the middle of a mix, you'll think, hey, oh, I love the way that the LA2A sound on the bass. And, boom, you throw it on there, it gives you exactly the sound that you're going for. And those are the types of things that you want to get to. So a lot of the things when I sort of intuit, quote unquote, what plugin or something to throw on a thing, it's really stems from my experience with using, in most cases, the actual components. And my experience with having those components in on sessions and working with them in that fashion, in that very kind of like surgical kind of environment with a really very accurate monitoring systems and working with that. So anyway, blobbing along like I do, let's kind of start by, maybe what I'll do is here's a really cool shortcut if you're not aware. If you hold the Command key or Control key if you're on a Windows computer, while working, this is a shortcut that works with Pro Tools, obviously. And you have to do it separately on a mono and a stereo track. But if you hold the Command key and then you click on the particular plugin, it then comes up in a short list, as you see here, up at the top. And so what you can do here is if you're working with a particular grouping of plugins, and you could see that I kind of do this as I'm going along, I can place those particular plugins that I'm working with on this list. And then they just show up quickly, and I don't have to go diving through menus and piles of individual plugins. Anyway, there's a quick mixing tip within the architecture of with this whole thing here. So one of the things that is kind of cool about this particular plugin is that unlike vintage components, which this sort of emulates, it doesn't emulate like a particular thing. Like it's not like it says, oh, here's an optical emulation, here's a VCA emulation, here's a tube Varamu emulation or anything like that. But what it does do is it kind of gives you the characteristics of many of those components and then the ability of having variable settings to work with them. So as you know, when you work with many of these vintage components, they were very specifically designed for tasks like broadcast for most of them with the limiters and things like that. And so the attack times and release characteristics were very carefully calibrated for those particular situations. And when you apply them to music, sometimes they work amazingly well and sometimes they don't. And so, in other words, if I call up this compressor, or I call up a Renaissance compressor, or I call up a C1 compressor, I can basically, because of the flexibility of the settings, I can find settings that will work with any sound that you can feed into it. And But if you were to take an LA2A, it just won't have nearly the flexibility. So in order to get it to work well or effectively with all kinds of sounds, you're very limited. And so this was the sort of concept that drove this particular plugin. And it has a number of really amazing features that are quite cool. It has a harmonic distortion emulation here, so it has 4 settings. It doesn't tell you what they are or anything. You have an output setting, so you have a threshold right here in the middle, right? So your input gain is what it is. There's no input gain section, so usually you get either an input gain with a fixed threshold or a threshold without an input gain, typically one or the other, right? Because they basically are doing more or less the same thing. And then you have an output control for makeup gain. You have a ratio control, which goes from 1 to 50 to 1. You have an attack and a release time. And I'll get back to the release time. And then you have a punch control. And this is kind of interesting because it sort of hybridizes 2 functions. Like I can have a very fast attack, 0.5 milliseconds, and then I can have a punch thing, which is sort of emulating a slow attack setting, which allows the transient to really punch and pop through. And that's what this does. So you can sort of add this on top of the other thing. So if you followed many of the courses that I have, you know that I sometimes would layer compression. So I may have a fast attack, fast release compressor that would just be specifically about setting a drum set or a particular grouping of instruments back in the speakers. So they set back a little bit, cutting down on the transient, what I would call a functional compression. And then after that, I may have something else that performs some other vibe or pumping kind of function. And here you can somewhat do those types of things within the context of just one singular plugin. And it also gives you the ability to run parallel compression because of the mix control here, which allows you to go from 100% dry to 100% wet. And you also get the benefit of the meter moving when you adjust this. I'm not sure why it does that, but anyway, little buggy thing in there. Maybe just for a vibe, like gives it like a vintage thing. You get those type of clicky type of things with vintage components. Now, what's really cool here is that when you work with the release time, you can work actually within the BPM of the host or the host tempo basically. And what this does is it allows you to do settings that are musical values. And this can really kind of cut down on a lot of the type of work that, like minimal work, like figuring out what a quarter note or an eighth note delay time is, and then pumping that into the release time settings. But that is really cool because it just gives you the ability or the flexibility to make your adjustments accordingly to musical values. And so when I saw this, it's like, okay, so the cat's out of the bag. Obviously people know about it and engineers would work with these things. But because analog components didn't really, even when a knob had particular markings for release times, nobody sat there and said, a 16th note is 125 milliseconds. Let me try to find that on this dial. They would just kind of tweak it in until it felt good. And whatever value that ended up being is what it would just end up being, and you would just kind of work with it. So this offers like the flexibility of it's like an amazing plugin in terms of the flexibility that it has. And in lieu of purchasing, lots of vintage plugins, which you should accumulate as they kind of go on sale or whatever, and kind of get through them one by one, this is a great one to have that sort of fills in a lot of those gaps and gives you something that is functional and more powerful than even sort of just like some of the other like Renaissance compressors and things like that. Now, it doesn't have expansion. That's a cool feature there. The C1 compressor with the sidechain in particular allows you to do all kinds of things like de-essing and stuff like that, which you can't do here. But in terms of sort of an analog-ish compressor, not a bad one. So let's get into some sounds here. So unlike my promise where I said, hey, I'm gonna call up a different multi-track, I didn't find one that really kind of suited exactly what I wanted to do here. And also I have to, kind of make sure that I have the rights to do all this stuff. So that kind of factors in as well. So here, I can kind of kind of play with some different settings here. Like I actually just by accident sort of dropped this into an eighth note setting, and this actually may be really appropriate here. And so I'm gonna just kind of maybe just start with the basic compression, doing like a little bit of a pumping movement here. So I'm going to try bringing this up a little bit faster. And I like the quarter note setting. That's a really unusual one. I normally don't go to that long of a setting. There's something about that seems to pull the sound together a little bit more. What I'm going to do here is also I'm going to raise the output level here just to kind of bring this up overall so we can hear this a little bit better. And what I'm going to do is I'll put a little bit of punch in here. So I can also play with the ratio, which I haven't done here. So let me just kind of start there. And it's amazing if you really sweep that, you can hear like the different tonal coloration. You can actually almost like create the openness. It sort of affects the shape of what's going on, and that's very much an analog component kind of thing. And even like these analog components definitely create like a different setting here. There's also a limiter setting, which goes beyond, although technically, more than 20 to 1 is limiting. And I'm just going to add like a little bit of makeup gain here. And you can hear how this just really kind of brings open the sound here. So I'm just going to... This is sort of fun without the... without any EQ whatsoever. But it's interesting, I'm going to kind of play with this a little bit to see if I can bring out a little bit of body here in the... It's actually kind of cool. You really hear like the amount of, in terms of like the different analog settings, you get the different characteristics of each. And my feeling is this is where it starts to emulate the release characteristics of particular components. And this almost acts like an EQ, which is really powerful. So I'm going to kind of follow with this setting and then kind of move on to the overheads where I can get a little bit more aggressive. So this guy here, let's kind of go back here a little bit, and this is usually one where you can be a little bit more aggressive. Almost seems like there's a flam in here all the time with this. I'm going to leave that punch control down and kind of play with that as I kind of work in the other components. And let's just see what we can do here with the sounds of this. Let's go back to the band. I generally like to compress overheads a bit more than the rest of the drum kit because this really is the air. This is really where it breathes. And I'm going to get back to that attack setting. This seems more transformer based. This seems more optical based. I'm just guessing. This seems more like VCA based and FET based. I take that back. That might be opto, and this might be a little bit more on the tube Varamu. Anyway, you really get a lot of tonal coloration, which is really cool here with this, so we can really kind of play with this. It's probably not going to let me do that. No. Okay. Here's where I can kind of get a little heavy with the heavy-handed. So this is all with the basic same settings here. Amazing, like, you know, even though, like, I'm not really, other than the room here, and this is barely kind of, it's not a big part of the sound, it's not like a big room or something like that. Kind of gives it like a nice air. I'm going to do a similar type of thing that I do with the snare here for the claps. Amazing, because here I can make the claps very present and bright, snappy, a little more mid-rangey, somewhere in between, or warm and more in the background. Let's go with snappy here. And that can just kind of roll, I think, with that as it is. And our funky loop. So it's amazing here, just like working with this, how much I can open up the sound. And practically it becomes a form of EQ. It always amazes me how much you can really do when you dig into it with compression. It's just just digging into the settings and like how much, not just depth, because the movement, but when you start to bring in that air and then you start to be able to work with the different tonal characteristic settings. And basically what I've done is I've set a vibe here in terms of my attack and release times. So you notice that I'm staying consistent with that. Like that's my model for this. I figure out what kind of works in terms of a release time characteristic, and then I want everything to be pumping and moving and breathing at that same kind of rate. And this analog functioning here is really cool because it acts like a form of EQ as far as working with it. So you really feel the sense of depth. So let's bring in the bass. I may kind of make this bass pump a little bit here with the punch control. And this is sort of weird, but I'm going to kind of make the release time longer. And I like really doing this because it helps to even out the bass and allow the drums to be punchier. So this is with the same release time. And this is with a double, longer release. I take that back. I actually kind of like it pumping with the drums. So let's see if we can find the right tonal character here. It's like candy in a store. I don't know what I like. Do I like number 2, number 4? I'm going to go with number 4. Of course you like number 2, John. Oh, let's see. I'm gonna go with your instincts there. I think number 2 will work. And here I'm just gonna drop this right on here to. Check this out. Interesting with all of that, I kind of lost a little bit of the vibe of the claps. Maybe because the basses are too loud. Also not really feeling the pulse of the kick. So you can see here how much, all of this, helps to just kind of pull the again, like with all the other things that we do, is like as if this is something new. Like every time we've called up a compressor, it's doing it in some different kind of way. I really love the flexibility here, though, with this. It's a really, a really, really cool plugin for that. Put up that silly reverb. And we also have here, now we're clipping the output bus significantly, so I'm going to back it off a little bit here. And let's kind of go into, using this in our drum squash, configuration. So since we've gone one way here with the attack, we'll leave that attack with kind of, this is where we can, maybe where we can, here, and I can, this is just the drum squash here. That may or may not work. We're going to kind of see what happens with that. Kind of like the faster release time, but we'll see how this works in the context of everything. Like that seems a little bit too crushed. Now this is soloed, so we'll just, it may end up bringing, oops, hold on one second. All right, let's very least louder. Who doesn't love that? And I'm surprised is that I don't have the bass in there. So let's just see what happens if I kind of wield the bass into this as well. I kind of like this, and normally I don't kind of mess with these levels here on this, but I'm just gonna mix back the bass in the group here and the squash. Now, I know people can clap that fast, but do you think they actually clap that fast, or do you think it was an edit? I think it was an edit. I think it definitely was an edit. I mean, there was nothing like edited there. Like they didn't leave a trail of, what do you, like a popcorn trail, or was it like, you leave a little crumb trail or whatever so you can get back. It wasn't like, yeah, you can get into like speed clappers, people that can clap like really, 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 really fast. All in the wrist, by the way. But I don't think they can do that. I think that was all edited. It sounds edited to me, but it's... digging some. So now with the keys, I'm going to bring the keys more up front, because now I kind of got like this. It's kind of cool because I definitely have like a. There's definitely like a nice character vintage sound to it, which I really like. And so working with that, you can really, you can still capture that kind of a feeling or a vibe of like almost like a console mix, where we've gone through things where you work with just the V comp and it has like a certain sonic characteristic. This gives you a little bit more coloration, but it does have a great, the flexibility and the tonal characters are really. So here I'm going to go with let the synths be more up front and let that rhythm section kind of sit in the back a bit. And we're going to go here with, let's figure out what settings kind of work with this. I want something that's really open. That usually means like a faster release time. So this is going to be with an 1/8 note release time. So just playing with the attack time here to figure out how much of this I want to let through. I could also go with sort of a medium setting of like 5. Add a little bit of the punch setting in. So this is not giving me this sort of clarity I was hoping for. So I'm going to investigate like a different approach here, maybe going to a slower release time. The release was too fast. So in if there's a lesson here with this in terms of working with this, it may be that you have an idea of like just like with the bass, like where I thought a lot of times doubling or making longer the bass release time helps the drums to kind of punch through them a bit better, right? Gives them like makes the bass a little bit smoother, and that in effect makes the drums punchier. But in this case, it didn't work. They seem to be really well coordinated together, and they needed to be that way. And then with the keyboard here, I thought like a quicker release would make that just sort of pop right out in front, and that didn't work either. It just disappeared. So I go with some setting that helps to fill out what was missing. So if it's now all of a sudden too thin and wiry, now I'm going to slow down the release time to kind of bring it out, and all of a sudden this pops back into the mix. And then I can use this punch control to bring it a little bit more forward in the mix. So here, you really get, I think you can get a real idea of like how powerful working with the compression can be in this. I didn't even play with the analog settings on that because it just seemed to come right up. But in this, let's see, I think this, see where this... So I'm going to start here, see if I can warm this up a little bit. So let's go back to... So here we have now, let's kind of take this guy out and take this guy out too. So let's see if we can find some kind of way to bring out like the vocal here. And what I'm going to do here is kind of try a little bit something different from what I've done with the other guys here. And this is to kind of create a little bit more evenness.
Tie lock to the stick, tie
go with a lower ratio.
Tie lock to the stick, 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 tie lock. Purge and be clean. The asphalt is green. Seats, changing seats, changing seats. Stick, tie, lock to the 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 stick, tie.
So I'm going here with the analog 1 characteristic.
Tie, lock to the stick, 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 tie, lock. Purge and be clean. The asphalt is green.
Just to bring in a little bit of
changing seats, changing seats.
Little consistency in there.
Tie lock to the stick, tie lock to the stick, tie lock to the
go back to the verse.
It shall pass, the wine in your glass, the scratch in your throat, honey has.
So sort of like that low threshold compression idea here. And I can do this also here in for the male vocal. And let's just kind of see what that's.
Soon it shall pass, the wine in your glass, a scratch in your throat, honey hand. It will be fair, the moon is brand new.
Dirt into bread, lucky few.
Lucky you, lucky you, lucky you, lucky you, lucky you, lucky you, lucky you. Stick, tie, lock, to the 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 stick, tie, lock.
To the stick.
So here's where we can. This is where we can have a little bit of fun. I haven't really done this with this compressor, and one of the more powerful features, which is to work with this. And let's get into a much more aggressive compression here that really pumps and breathes. And then let's kind of do a wet dry with it. So here I'm just going to go to fast attack, fast release. Let's cue up to the chorus.
Stick, tie, lock, to the 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 stick, tie, lock. Stick, tie, lock, to the stick, tie, lock, to the stick, tie, lock, to the stick, tie.
All right, and then I can work with my wet dry control.
To the stick, tie, lock, 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 to the stick, tie, lock.
So I'll kind of figure out what the overall gain reduction is. So it's showing you a net gain reduction there when you adjust the wet dry control.
Stick, tie, lock, to the 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 stick, tie, lock, tie, lock.
So kind of pull this back a little bit.
Stick, tie, lock, to the 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 stick, tie, lock.
And you can really hear the presence that brings out. And let's just see what this sounds like.
Tie lock to the stick, 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 tie lock.
Go back.
Tie lock to the stick, 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 tie lock.
Uh-oh. The ass? Is that what it says?
Tie lock to the stick, 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 tie lock.
And then, hey, we got to open up some effects here. Can't have these guys all dry like that.
Tie lock to the stick, 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 tie lock.
The asphalt is green. Seats, changing seats, changing seats.
Tie lock to the stick, tie lock to the stick, tie lock to the stick.
So let's hear the overall.
To the stick, tie
That guy needs one, but we can go on forever and ever. Let's take a look at maybe throwing one of these guys on the mix bus, and then we'll kind of wrap up this. It's a very cool, very flexible compressor, though. That's a lot of gain. Usually with this, I'm going to kind of go with a lighter ratio. Get it to do like a subtle pumping here. Trying to work out a release time.
And pass along the rest to me, pristine. Head on shoulders in the in-between. You're the lightest thing I've ever seen. Break and pass along the rest to me, pristine. 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 Pristine.
Not really. The background vocals are way too loud. I don't know what I did. I overcompressed them. Let's go back to the band section. Here again, you can feel the pumping movement there really helps to open up and pull together the track. Fooled around with everything on the analog setting except for off.
Soon it shall pass, the wine in your glass, the scratch in your throat, honey has. Don't be fair.
Sounds like Madonna. Dig it. So anyway, a really cool one though. I really like this as far as a compressor goes, and the more you kind of play with it, the more you can kind of see where there's lots of options here. And I don't think I fooled around as much with the analog settings. And the more I kind of play with it, like just with here, you could really see that it how you can really bring out a different tonal characteristic. I seem to mostly gravitate away from the 3 setting, which seemed to be also the lowest volume, the warmest of all of them. So there's something there to that in each one of those analog characteristics. I don't think it particularly emulates just I think it more emulates probably just different vintage components, but it does adjust the release settings, so you get more open type settings. It seems with the 1 and the 4, 2 is somewhere kind of in between, 3 is absolutely the warmest. And playing with those different characters helps you could hear just, taking this without EQing anything, you can really pull a lot of juice out of a mix here. And I think, I don't know, I think it did that pretty well. So let's wrap this one up. I think this is a good one. The mixing technique of the week, mixing with the Waves H comp, a good one. and one you can always get on special and is definitely worth having in the plugin collection.